Welcome to Season 3 of Yoga Corner Chats, where we dive deep into the wisdom of purpose-driven women who are rewriting life's rulebook. I'm your host, Shelby Phoenix, and I'm thrilled to embark on this transformative journey with you. This season, we're breaking free from the ordinary, celebrating the extraordinary, and embracing the unapologetic pursuit of authenticity. Join us as we explore stories of resilience, self-discovery, and the pursuit of an uncharted path. Our conversations are more heart-centered than ever, delving into the core of what it means to lead a life in alignment with your values. We're shattering societal norms one episode at a time and redefining success on our terms. Each week, we'll be joined by incredible women, entrepreneurs, yoga teachers, wellness warriors, and more, who are daring to be different and inspiring us to do the same. Get ready for an abundance of inspiration, empowerment, and unfiltered authenticity. So if you're ready to trade conformity for creativity, perfectionism for purpose, and self-doubt for self-love, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and join our vibrant community of listeners who are choosing to live life authentically. Yoga Corner Chats is more than just a podcast. It's a journey. Let's embark on this path together towards a life that aligns with our deepest values. Are you ready? Roll out your mat, take a deep breath, and let's dive in. Press play and let the transformation begin. Welcome to Yoga Corner Chats, where real women, real conversations, and real transformation happen. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Yoga Corner Chats. My name is Shelby Phoenix, and I'm your host. Today, we're going to be joined by Katie, a life purpose coach, helping heart-centered humans connect with their true self and create a life of freedom and adventure. And today, we're going to be talking about living a life of purpose and finding your space in the world. I am so excited to welcome Katie. So, Katie, maybe start by just briefly introducing yourself.
So, hey, I'm Katie, and you can probably tell from my accent, I'm Scottish. I grew up in the Western Isles. So for anyone who doesn't know, it's like in the Highlands on the West Coast. So a little bit isolated and kind of wild. From there, I went and I worked at sea for 10 years. I was a deck officer in the Merchant Navy, mostly on oil and gas tankers, and then later on an aggregate dredger and a couple of ferries here and there. And then as I was kind of doing that, my kind of interest for like health and wellness and personal growth grew. And I kind of realized after like quite a few years that life that had once been like my dream and like what I felt like was my purpose wasn't like resonating anymore, and I was kind of like just living for when I was on leave. And so earlier this year I left the life at sea to kind of go full time with my business and kind of actually like live out my purpose kind of more permanently.
Oh, that's amazing. I can't wait to dive more into like the details of your story and your business. But before we get too deep into this conversation, I love to start these conversations by having us take a couple of deep breaths together so we can get really grounded. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
All right. And anybody who's listening, I invite you to join us as well. If you're sitting down, settle into your sits bones and any part of your body that's touching your chair, whatever surface you're sitting on. Sit up nice and tall without forcing perfect posture. If it's safe to do so in your space, I invite you to close your eyes or take a soft gaze. We're going to take 3 deep belly breaths, starting to inhale through the nose. Feel your belly rise. Feel your rib cage expand. Feel all the way to your collarbone. And then let it out with a big sigh. 2 more like that. In through the nose, belly, rib cage, collarbone. big sigh. One last time, just like that. Inhale all the way to the top, biggest breath of the day. And get completely empty. When you're ready, gently flutter your eyelids open. All right, are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, perfect. So you started sharing a little bit about your journey and what led you to become a life coach, a life purpose coach. And one thing you said was that you had once thought that um, you know, you had discovered your life purpose and your dream and were living it, and then it kind of shifted and changed. So I would love to ask you, how did you kind of discover your new life purpose, and what was that process like for you?
So I guess it kind of starts like way back, like maybe like 8, 9 years ago even. And I really started to get into personal growth kind of through the avenue of fitness. Like
Yeah.
I'd played sports growing up and did kind of all those things. And I really got into, mostly at that time it was a lot of running, a lot of like interval training, and kind of got into this sort of online fitness community back in, it was probably like 2014, 15, that kind of like Fitspo
Yeah.
Instagram community. And kind of through that, I started to get into like personal growth. And it was very much from this kind of lens of like that very kind of masculine approach, that sort of like never miss a Monday. The only workout you regret is the one you didn't do, that kind of lens, which kind of fitted with the kind of work environment I was in at the time, working at sea. But kind of over time, like that wasn't really working for me, and I started to kind of fall away from some of the things that I loved, like even like things like running wasn't like, I wasn't finding joy in it anymore. And I started to be like, well, if this isn't like my thing, who am I, and like what else do I do?
Yeah.
And around that kind of time, like maybe 2018, 19, I had like what was like my quarter life crisis, where it felt like I wasn't quite who I had been, but I was like, I've changed and I don't know who I am now. And that was kind of when I started diving really deeper into like the like world of like personal growth. And yeah, over time since then, it's just kind of become like more of a focus for me.
Mm. Do you think that shift into, because you kind of were talking about how like you started it getting into like taking care of yourself through like go like working out, right, in that like very masculine way where you're like kind of ashamed if you miss a workout, or like don't put your all into it, and more into like, it sounds like a softer like side of personal growth. What do you
Yeah.
notice about that?
So I feel like it kind of came out of nowhere. I'd kind of started to feel like a bit like disconnected and stuck, and like I didn't feel that energy and that motivation that like naturally I usually have quite a lot of, and it just kind of, it felt like it kind of like fell off a cliff. And I was
Yeah.
like, what is happening? And I kind of realized, like in hindsight, at the time I didn't realize this is what was happening, but I went through this phase where I felt every emotion all at once, but
Mm,
also like numb at the same time. And it's only in hindsight that I realized that actually as a kid I was like super sensitive and quite intuitive, but over time, I'd kind of like dampened that down.
yeah.
Um, And it was kind of through that period of time that it all kind of came bubbling up all at once.
Yeah.
And I feel like I was kind of like forced into that kind of that softer side of personal growth. And recently I was actually reading some of my like journals from that period of time, and I'd forgotten like how much resistance I had to it, like to that, like slowing down and not basing everything on my productivity.
Yeah, totally.
So like at the time I resisted it a lot, but like I realize now kind of why that was.
Yeah. Um, can you share a little bit more about that resistance to kind of like slowing down and like even taking time to rest? Because I kind of think of this, I don't even know who said this to me, but it sticks with me. And it's like if you don't like rest, like your body will force you to rest at like a very inconvenient time, most likely.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And yeah, that's been my experience. Like again, when I was like reading through these journals, I was like noticing that I was starting to get like sick, not like really sick, but I would get colds or I would start getting headaches. And they're like, I'm not like a very headachy person. Like they're not something I ever had growing up or anything. But it was around that time, like I started like feeling sick more. And I think kind of like you were saying, it was like my body's way of being like, you need to slow down. The
Yeah.
other thing, um, around that time, when I was working deep sea, so I was away on like cargo ships for 3, 4 months usually. And like 2 or 3 trips in a row on my last month on the ship, like my last few weeks, I would come out with like a rash. Like I still don't know what that was or where it had come from, but like half of my face would swell up and I would have this rash like all over my body. And it was like really itchy and it was like an allergic reaction or something. I
Yeah.
don't know what it was, but I think it was like, yeah, my body's way of like forcing me to slow down.
Yeah. And I know for me in my personal growth and like wellness journey, the realization that often my body is trying to tell me things like through a physical reaction, whether it's like if feeling ill or having a rash or having a headache or not being able to sleep or whatever. And sometimes it's even like signaling about like my mental health, even though I'm
Yeah.
feeling it physically. Do you um, feel like the like harder way you were living your life was affecting your mental health as well as your physical health?
Yeah, I would say so. I think like initially, like working at sea is kind of like an all or nothing thing. Because when you're on the ship, like you live there, that's your whole life, and you're
Yeah,
there for like months at a time. And but then when you're off, like you're completely off. And
right.
that kind of all or nothing mindset kind of fitted with who I was at that time. Um, but I even like I started to realize that even when I was on leave and I was like I was off, because you work hard when you're on the ship and you get this leave that's supposed to be like your time to recover. But I was trying to fit like 2 times the amount of like living into this period of time where I was off. And at
Yeah.
that time, it wasn't even equal. I was away maybe 2/3 of the time and home 1/3 of the time. So even when I was off, like I wasn't really like relaxing.
Yeah.
I remember my friend saying to me at the time, she was like, "You don't know how to chill out. Like you're like incapable of resting."
It sounds almost like when you were like on your rest, your, time off, you were like, even though you were, trying to have your time off and do things you enjoyed, it was still that philosophy of like, if I'm not productive, I'm not like,
yeah, completely.
spending my time well.
Yeah. Yeah, even like my rest had to be like productive.
Yeah. So through discovering your life purpose and like finding this softer way of aligning with your values, you kind of, what was the process of you becoming a coach to help other people do this?
So I kind of had it in like the back of my mind for like maybe a year or maybe even two, as like something I would maybe like want to do in the future. But once I'd kind of left deep sea and I was working in that like a different sector of the industry and I was still really enjoying it, I knew, like I always knew I didn't want to work at sea forever.
Yeah.
But I was still kind of enjoying where I was, and I thought, oh, like maybe sometime in the future, like that'll be something that I'll do. And all this stuff that I do for fun, and that like people come to me and ask for advice, or one of the things that I really like to do is like I gather all the different information. I don't know if you know human design, but I have a 1 in my profile. So like the investigator who like I do all the research and gather all the information and then kind of can like share it and teach it, I guess, in a way that kind of makes sense. So I was like, people were coming to me and asking me like to explain things or like for recommendations. And I was like, I really enjoy doing this. Like I do this with all my leave, all my time off.
Right.
I could actually like make something with this. And it was only in like 2020 and 2021 during like the pandemic when even our work on the ships even slowed down for a bit. And I was like, actually, like now is like the perfect time to actually do this and like actually start making moves. Because I realized I was like thinking, oh yeah, someday I'll do that. But actually, like, why don't I just do it now?
So when you're like sharing information with your clients or maybe with your followers online, what does living a life of purpose mean to you? How do you define that?
So I think everyone like at like a core level has the same purpose. And that everyone's purpose is just to be the most like authentic version of themselves that they are, and to do the things that reflect that and to kind of make their life reflect who they are.
Yeah.
So of course that looks completely different for everyone, but like if we really, really simplify it, I think we all have the same purpose.
Yeah. If someone's listening to this and they're like, I have no idea what my life purpose is, or like, I want to start to live life more aligned with my purpose. What would you say to someone to help them start to identify or define their life purpose?
So I like, first of all, like when people are like kind of lost and confused and like what am I actually here to do? I get that because I've been there for sure. And I think we overcomplicate this idea of purpose. Like we think it has to be like something really like lofty and that you're going to write headlines about and that's really big and bold. But actually like it doesn't have to be. Like there's big P purpose, which could be, that big mission statement, but then there's also like little p purpose. So like the little everyday things that you do that make you feel like you're living a life that's fulfilling and that has meaning.
Yeah.
But I think your question was like, how do you find that purpose?
Well, I really like what you just said about big P and little p purpose, because I think that is kind of what people get stuck on, is like, oh my God, if it's not like groundbreaking, then like what's like the point? Or like, I'm not going to achieve something so big. So like, but I feel like that is overlooked, is like, especially online too. I feel like people are like, oh, if your business isn't making six figures or 10 grand a month or whatever, then like, so then I feel like people are like, shrink themselves a little bit when it's more about like small daily actions. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So yeah, and I totally agree. Like sometimes, especially in the online space, like I think also we get like attached to like the external metrics
Yeah.
of it, when I always think purpose is actually more about like a feeling rather than like what you do. It's the why you do something and like who you are rather than what you're actually doing.
Yeah. Like the li- like 100 little choices as opposed to like one big action.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when we look at it like that, it seems so much more achievable and approachable
Yeah.
rather than like something huge that's off like in the future that you're never going to reach.
Yes. So, like, if someone is trying to find these little like moments or choices so that they can feel like they're actually making, steps towards finding their purpose or just living more in alignment, like, what is something that someone could do like today to like get a little tiny bit closer to feeling that fulfillment?
So I I really like the idea of like following your curiosity.
Mm,
Because so often like we're told that it's so simple to find your purpose. All you need to do is like do this thing that you're really passionate about. But a lot of the time we don't have like one thing that we're passionate about that we're willing to drop everything for. And it's more kind of about following what you're curious about.
mm,
So I always say, like, as a start point to like take a moment if you want, maybe like do a bit of journaling or meditation or whatever, but like pause for a minute and kind of think, what are you actually like curious about, or what do you feel kind of drawn to and lit up by right now? And like, how can you do more of that? Or
yeah.
like take steps towards that. Even
Yeah.
if it's something that like you see online that you think, oh, so and so does this thing and that looks really cool. Maybe I'll try that.
Yeah.
And that thing doesn't have to be your purpose. It doesn't need to like put any pressure on it, but just kind of follow what you feel curious about and what lights you up, and kind of see where that takes you.
Yeah, yeah, giving yourself permission too, like to just
Mhm.
try something without any like outcome, like goal or
Yeah.
judgment. Like, okay, I'm just gonna try it.
Yeah, because so often we can be like, okay, this is going to be the thing, and then put all this pressure on it, and then when it is no longer the thing, you feel like you failed. Whereas if you're just like, yeah, we'll see how it goes,
Yes.
it's a lot lighter, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to call this or I do call this white canvas syndrome, like when you're like an artist or you want to make art and you're staring at the blank canvas. It's so intimidating because you don't want to mess it up, but you just
Uh,
have to put the first mark down.
yeah. Yeah, I think of it as like when you get like a shiny new journal and you're like, I need to write something profound on this first page because I don't want to mess it up.
When someone's going through this process of trying to kind of like connect with themselves more and discover what they like and maybe trying new things, what are some like challenges that people face on this journey that you've noticed?
So I think one of the biggest challenges, especially I work with a lot of people who are in that kind of quarter life phase, so like 20s and early 30s. And one of, I think, the biggest challenges people come up against is that like you change so much in that. I mean, you change always like through life, but I think especially kind of through like your late teens to your early 30s, like so much changes in that time. And so many people are kind of, they feel like they're still attached to like past versions of them or who the people in their life expect them to be because of who they were a few years ago, whether it was in school or college or, you know, maybe it's their family. And so often they feel like disconnected from that version of them, but they feel like they're still attached in some way because that's like what is expected.
Yeah, right.
And like navigating that kind of change in relationships can be kind of difficult as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely noticed that like with my family personally, um, is that sometimes it's hard to uh accept like changes like when I stopped drinking, like they're like,
Mm. Yeah.
what do you mean?
Yeah.
Have a drink with dinner. And I'm like, like you don't understand this is really important to me.
I've had the same experience with I don't really drink much alcohol either, but I've had the same experience like, but what? You can love this.
um right, like when you're trying to live aligned with your values and it doesn't necessarily match the values of the people around you, like that's a really big challenge too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things they say about like romantic relationships, like make sure that your values are aligned, but it applies for all relationships as well. I think that they don't have to be exactly the same, but there needs to kind of be like some kind of respect and acknowledgement of like what's important to the other person, even if maybe you don't get it or it's not important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. um I'm wondering, like, do you have any personal stories or like stories from your clients about overcoming these types of challenges?
So for me, I kind of like actually what you mentioned about like not drinking alcohol. That was kind of like a big shift for me. And the like when I stopped drinking again was around that time that I refer to as like my quarter life crisis, where I was like, who am I and what do I even want to do? And around that time, actually, I started getting like quite ill when I would drink. Like the hangovers, I'd never really had hangovers before. And like all of a sudden, I came back from sea once and we couldn't drink when we were on the ship. So that was like 4 months of no alcohol at all anyway. And I came home and like the first time I drank, like the hangover was so bad. Um, and I was just like, well, I don't want to do this anyway. Like, I feel good when I drink, and this is not worth it. But kind of around that time as well, I was like getting into all sorts of like spiritual stuff. Like, I was getting into astrology and tarot and all these things that a lot of my friends like weren't into. And around that time, I felt like what I wanted to do was like introduce all my friends to these things, and you know, we would all do these things together.
Yeah.
And I actually had to just accept that maybe like they weren't into this thing. and I was kind of going in this direction, and that we could still be friends and we could still like be in each other's lives, but it didn't have to be based on like being in the same place and doing the same things.
Right.
And that like I think they say like you have like friends for a season, friends for a reason, and friends like for a lifetime.
Yeah.
I had to kind of be like, well, these specific people aren't going to be like everything. They're not going to be into exactly the same things as me and doing the exact same things as me. And actually like there's still value in that.
Yeah.
But I can find other friends who are into these other things, and we can have like a different kind of relationship.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a lot about kind of adjusting my own expectations and kind of accepting like them accepting that I was into these different things and kind of going in maybe a different direction, but then also me accepting that they weren't into those things, and that like it wasn't up to me to like force them to do it or anything like that. And that was fine.
That kind of leads me to my next question. So, like, when you are finding your own like values and like your purpose and like how you're gonna choose to like move through the world, how do you kind of take those like personal, like introspective, like choices and discoveries, and then like take that out into the world and like find your space?
So I think a lot of it, like you mentioned, comes down to like what's actually important to you. What are your like core values? And how are you actually making choices each day that kind of reflect that? Because so often we'll say that we value such and such a thing, like we value connection, but then you spend every evening like doom scrolling on social media or numbing out to Netflix and not actually spending time with the people that you love, like whether it's people you live with or your friends or family. So actually like getting really clear about what is most important to you, what are these core values, and noticing the ways that you're not actually like living in alignment with them. Because it's so easy to like declare that this is what's important.
Right.
I think of like that episode of The Office where Michael Scott shouts that I declare bankruptcy. Like it doesn't actually mean much if you're not doing anything with it.
Right. I say like manifestation isn't magic, right? Like you have to like if connection is important to you and you want to create connections, like that's where the hard part is, and you have to like put the, kind of like motivate yourself to go create the connections that you are desiring.
Yeah, exactly. Because then there's the whole debate of like, what are you actually valuing?
Right.
If you say you value connection, but then you're doing things that create disconnection, like your actions, like you're not actually valuing that in your like day-to-day actions.
Right, right. So I think that one thing that sometimes makes people feel torn is like the like vision or idea of like pursuing their purpose and then like the reality of like real life, like maybe having to go to a job that doesn't feel aligned or like whatever it is in your life that you like have to do. So how do you advise people like to find that balance?
It can be so hard, especially like if you're in like a job that doesn't light you up and that isn't fulfilling. And I think that is a lot of the time where people kind of get caught out. They're kind of like, well, on the one hand, I want to live this like amazing, purposeful, big, bold life, but then the reality of, you know, having to work and make money and pay the bills. And I think a lot of it comes down to, so often we think our purpose has to be our job.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be. It can be for a lot of people. But that doesn't have to be where you feel the most lit up. Like it's perfectly okay to do a job that you enjoy, and that, like, it's important that you find meaning and some fulfillment in your job, but it doesn't have to be everything.
Yeah.
And I think that is a lot of the time where people kind of get caught out, that they think that the job has to be like everything, when it doesn't.
Right. I think that comes back to that kind of productivity, like that, like harder, right? Like, oh, my job is my productivity is my worth is my purpose. So if my job doesn't fulfill all those things for me, then like I'm not living, then like, you know, that's just how I am, like stuck in this. As opposed to those like little choices you can make in your day to day, like the intention you go into, or like, you know, how you interact with the people at your work, or, you know, those little P's.
Exactly. The little P, like purpose, and like the little things you're doing, but also coming back to the purpose actually being about who you are and why you're doing something, and kind of living, I guess, living with intention and showing up as like the most authentic version of you, no matter kind of like what exactly you're doing.
Yeah. So as a life purpose coach, what impact do you hope to leave with people through your purpose and your work?
So my kind of main mission is to help people feel free, like free to be themselves, free to like feel free to actually like show up and express who they are, free to kind of choose their own path. That's another thing that a lot of people that I work with kind of get caught out by, this in this sort of quarter life phase, where there's the path that's expected of them. Like we all know the path, the things you're supposed to do. But it's like this freedom to be able to choose your own path. Like if you want to follow that kind of the expected timeline, then that's cool, but also you don't have to, and kind of feeling free to do that, and confident in your own journey.
Yes. My favorite quote is, when you are feeling powerless, you've forgotten how much choice you really have. And I try to remember that when I am feeling powerless, because sometimes it's so easy to forget that there is a choice, like most of the time.
Almost always there are options available to us. We just are maybe not seeing them, or we're not open to them.
Yes. I would love to kind of wrap this conversation up by giving you the opportunity to share about any projects or resources or offers that you have, or just like anything else you'd like to mention or share.
So at the moment, I'm not sure when this episode will air, but at the moment I'm preparing a group coaching program around unlocking your soul's purpose. So depending on when this airs, that might be an option. I also do like one-to-one life purpose coaching as well. Kind of the best place to find me and like kind of what I'm working on is on Instagram. and it's at I am Katie Vann. And I have like my little corner of the internet is my newsletter, Hello Moon. It's called that because every time I see the moon, I say, "Oh, hello moon." So that became like my weekly newsletter, which I send out on a Monday and a Thursday. So on a Monday with just like a little prompt or something to ponder through the week, and then on a Thursday, a kind of more long form blog piece. So that's kind of like my wee community, along with Instagram's the other kind of place I show up most of the time.
Awesome. I want to send you so much gratitude for taking the time to be here today, for sharing your expertise and your story, and for being a part of Yoga Corner Chats.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you for joining us today on Yoga Corner Chats with Katie Vann, a life purpose coach. We hope you found inspiration in this quest for self-discovery and purpose. If you want to connect with Katie or explore her upcoming group coaching course, visit the show notes of this episode to find her website. Remember, your life's purpose is within your reach, and you have the power to create the life you've always dreamed of. Stay inspired and keep living unapologetically. Join us next time on Yoga Corner Chats for more inspiration.